So let's just get right into it. What if there was a kind of field guide for picking a life partner? One that wasn't about, shared hobbies or communication styles, but was all about primal attraction and our biological wiring. Today, we're going to break down a really provocative and, let's be honest, a highly unconventional framework for selecting a partner, and it's all aimed at one single goal: to only get married once. And look, this whole idea kicks off with a pretty bold claim from the author, Daniel Malchi. He's basically saying that all the modern dating advice we've been fed is fundamentally broken. He argues that it's training us to look for things like comfort and compromise when we should be looking for something, well, something much more instinctual. So here's how we're going to walk through his system. It's built on 5 key pillars. First, the polarity principle. Then how to gauge masculinity and femininity. After that, we'll get into spotting universal red flags. And finally, how to decode a potential partner's past. All right, so first up, let's talk about the absolute foundation of this entire system. It's something he calls the polarity principle. I want you to think all the way back to science class, right? You've got 2 magnets, the opposite poles, they snap together instantly. But the identical poles, they just push each other away. Well, the author here argues that human attraction works in exactly the same way, driven by this powerful push and pull between what he defines as masculine and feminine energies. And this is where it gets really interesting, because he actually turns this abstract idea into a mathematical formula. Seriously, on a scale of 0 to 10, he says that for a passionate, lasting marriage, the man's masculinity score minus the woman's femininity score has to be 3 or greater. If it's anything less, he claims you're just headed for a friendship, or more likely, a divorce. Okay, so if polarity is really a number, how in the world do you measure it? Well, the framework starts by giving us a kind of compass for gauging masculinity. The very first test is surprisingly visual, and it's all about a man's photos. According to the author, that posed say cheese smile is a huge red flag. He calls it an honor seeker smile, and he says it signals a deep need for approval from other people. A candid, genuine laugh, on the other hand, that's a total green light. It shows he can feel joy without needing anyone's validation. Then there's another key visual test he calls the beard barometer. The idea here is that a man's facial hair is a direct signal of his inner state. A totally clean-shaven face? The book suggests he's still seeking approval. But a short, well-groomed beard, that's the sweet spot. It supposedly indicates he's self-possessed, he's mature, he runs his own life. Now, moving from sight to sound, the author argues a man's voice is a direct window into his composure. A grounded, deep, and measured voice is supposed to signal calm and stability. But a voice that's really high-pitched or sounds strained, that's interpreted as a clear sign of inner anxiety. But it's not just about physical traits. The guide also zeroes in on a personality type to avoid at all costs: the people pleaser. The author's take is that a man who can't state his own opinion, or who can't politely disagree, just lacks the inner strength, the backbone, as he calls it, that's absolutely necessary for a stable marriage. Okay, so that's the masculine side. Let's flip the script and look at the other half of the equation: gauging femininity. And as you're about to see, the indicators here are often the exact inverse of the tests for men. And here it is, that direct contrast. While a man's posed smile is seen as a negative, the author states that for a woman, a genuine smile is the ultimate green light. It's interpreted as a sign of receptivity, of openness and warmth, which are all key components of feminine energy within this specific framework. And just like with men, the book gives us a very specific vocal profile. The ideal feminine voice, according to this guide, isn't supposed to be deep or forceful, but rather higher-pitched, warm, and gentle. It's just another data point for calculating that all-important polarity score. So look, getting that polarity number right is just the first filter. After you screen for these specific masculine and feminine energies, the framework says you have to move on to the deeper stuff, the issues of character. And that means looking for universal red flags that apply to absolutely everyone. This next part is huge. These are the universal red flags, and the author presents these as 2 massive deal breakers, and it doesn't matter what someone's masculine or feminine energy score is. First up is something the author calls a disproportionate reaction, or DR for short. This is when a really small trigger causes a gigantic emotional outburst. Think about someone having a full-blown rant because a waiter made a tiny mistake on their dinner order. He calls this the single loudest sign of hidden instability. The second universal red flag is what he calls a fear of abandonment. You've probably seen this before. It shows up as clinginess, needing constant reassurance, or panicking when you don't text back right away. The author argues this isn't a sign of affection. It's a sign of emotional dependency that means a person just isn't ready for marriage. All right, for the final part of this whole partner selection puzzle, you basically have to become a detective. You have to decode a potential partner's history because, according to this guide, their past is a direct preview of your future. A huge piece of this is what he calls the parent test, and the rule is incredibly simple. Pay very close attention to how they treat their family. The author claims there's a 1-to-1 ratio here. The respect or the contempt that they show their parents is exactly what you can expect to get from them a few years into the marriage. Now, this next one is really going to flip what you might think on its head. The guide offers a super counterintuitive way to look at someone who's divorced. If a person celebrates their divorce like they're just expressing pure relief, the author sees that as a good sign that they were the victim who finally escaped. But someone who's still mourning the loss, that's seen as a red flag. And finally, the framework insists that you have to scrutinize the reason for a past divorce. If it was for what the author considers an insignificant reason, something like just falling out of love, he labels them quick to the trigger. He suggests they have a really low commitment threshold and are probably going to quit again when things get tough. And this brings us right back around full circle to the author's core argument. The entire system is built on this one belief, that lasting desire isn't something you can negotiate. It's not something you can create with communication workshops. It's a primal, biological response that you either have or you don't. So after going through this incredibly detailed, very prescriptive field guide, from beard barometers to divorce celebrations, I guess the ultimate question for you is this: can a lifelong partnership really be reverse engineered with a formula?